Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. This is Simran. This is my podcast, Shelf Life, where we talk about books, their philosophies, but most importantly, our personal relationship with a book. Last week was great, our first episode back, and we received quite a lot of love. Um, and I got to hear some nice feedback. You guys like the fact that there's only audio now, and I don't know. I'm not sure how long I'm gonna continue with just audio, but right now it feels good. Right now it feels, like going back to the basics, and I think we can just keep, I don't know, keep at it for a while. Um, what else has happened over the past week? I think as a country, a lot of stuff has happened. We won at the Olympics. I don't know if I don't know if our readers are huge sports fans. I mean, I shouldn't be making that assumption because a lot of people are, especially, the fact that we are a developing nation. A lot of our investment as a collective goes into these activities, like sport or movies a lot. But again, it's not, I don't think we understand um, what international cinema is, or like not international cinema, but where we stand, our films stand on the international forum. And I don't think that matters either. But I think when it comes to sports and stuff like the Olympics, the pressure is high, right? And the fact that you have to concede to that pressure, you have to give in to it and hope that you come out of it stronger. Um, and I think that has a lot to do with the way we are, the way we do things, the way that we uh, perform. If you are a sports person, if you've been one your whole life, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this stuff, right? How do you cope with it? Where do you think it comes from? Honestly, I'm really interested to learn about where it all starts. Like, where does this pressure, where does this need to uh, win gold or win something in order to succeed? Where does that come from? Who put this in us? Was it ours from the start, or did we borrow it from somewhere? Um, that's the case with stories as well, right? I mean, weird segue, but it's true. Yeah, it's true that, you know, we borrow stories from somewhere, but we also are the creator of stories. We're the author of our own stories. And it's a very thin line. You really don't know at what point you are creating a story, authoring a story, and at what point you are just finishing another person's story. Um, and yeah, these are just really lofty things to think about, as usual. Um, that I think is the purpose of this podcast, to think about lofty things and wonder where we stand. But yeah, I think I have definitely been thinking about this quite a bit, especially since uh, the whole Simone Biles thing happened. In case you don't know, there were a couple of female sports personalities who actually came out and said that they are not able to perform anymore because of the kind of pressure that's put on them. And they also don't want to perform. They're choosing not to play because of the kind of pressure on them, and they just can't uh, devote the same kind of energy into the sport anymore, right? And it was a huge thing, right? There's been so many debates about this. Um, there's been so much talk about it. And I think that just made us, the reason why it hit hard is probably because it made us rethink how we do things. Um, are you the kind of person who likes being under a lot of pressure, who really believes that having a deadline, having too many deadlines, having too many expectations, other people's expectations on you, that makes you function better? Are you the kind of person who subscribes to that? Um, do you like that thought, or do you, reluctantly accept it? Um, it's a it's a lot to digest for sure, and I don't necessarily know where I stand on it, but I think I've always believed that I didn't fall under that category. I don't appreciate competition that much. I think I've grown to not appreciate it because of, uh, I think, just the kind of study that I had to do with sociology and everything. I've grown to dislike it a little bit. And I've realized that you know, there's um, more than just benefits to competition. There's actually a really dark side of it too. So that's where I stand. But I don't know about you guys, and I would love to know, especially if there's any sports people listening, if you've played a sport professionally before. So I would really love to know how this whole thing works and what is your mindset going into it. And yeah, and what I'm most interested in, honestly, is where do you think that mindset came from? Like, who gave it to you? Who told you that you had to really perform well um, to succeed? And yeah, I think given everything that's been happening, we've been talking a lot about mental health, and yet again, and um, thankfully, a lot of it has been quite impressive. A lot of the discussion has been progressive and impressive, and that brings me a lot of hope for sure. I think usually people like to box mental health up and give it a category and a label and define it as one thing, but it's really not. And especially when you see sports personalities talking about it, I think that puts things even under more, it puts things in a very weird space for everybody, I think, because you expect these successful people to have it all together, and then suddenly they come out and they're like, I'm having a really hard time. So yeah, I think it's been really interesting, and I think given all of that, given this space that we're in right now, and especially the space that we've been in for the past year and a half, I think it's really important to go back to some of these um, quote unquote inspirational books and memoirs that we read, right? I think it's very important to go back to stories that give us that little bit of hope, give us that um, little bit of a push to just keep moving, keep getting out of bed, keep reading, and keep hoping for something better. And I think that's the kind of space that I found myself in too as well, this past couple of months, and I think this year and a half. I think I've just really loved going back to memoirs. I used to read, I think I've mentioned this before, I used to read a lot of autobiographies when I started reading. I started with The Diary of Anne Frank. It left a really huge impact on me. So much so that I could never really read another Holocaust book without being really disturbed. So I kind of, kept away from that, but that book left a really huge impact on me. And recently I went back to it. I read Michelle Obama's autobiography, which is Becoming. We've done a review of that. It's up on this channel. You can check it out, and it was really good. I loved the book, absolutely loved it, and there was so much depth there. I think it goes back to the same thing. We love reading stories because we do like to imagine that um, there is a person who is this story, right? I think we like to imagine that the story actually exists, that it happened somewhere, especially when it's stories that are hopeful or happy or romantic in a good way. I think we really love to um, keep these stories close to us because they remind us of how things could be great for us as well, right? So I think it's important to go back to these stories, and which is why the book that I'm going to be talking about very briefly, because I genuinely feel that a book like this, you can't really review it. How do you review another person's life? Um, but it is a journey. Reading it was a journey. So I really want you guys to read this book and kind of also go into it blind. Don't really, I don't know, I mean, you would know about the personality anyway, but don't really read up too much. Just pick up the book and get into it, and because it's an autobiography, you can swallow it whole. It's not going to be very difficult to get through. So I'm confident that you'll be able to finish it quite fast. But pick it up and just go into it blind is my suggestion. The book that we're going to be talking about today is, as you have guessed by the title, The Choice by Edith Eger. Now, for those of you who have no idea who Dr. Edith is, she is a 92-year-old, 92 if I'm not wrong, 92-year-old Holocaust survivor and psychologist. Now, she has professionally helped, therapized rather, um, a lot of war veterans and people who suffer from PTSD. In fact, that is her, what do you call it, subfield, I guess. She helps people who've dealt with trauma, and she helps them overcome it, and she helps them move through it and really navigate it the best way possible. And she is, world renowned for her talks on resilience and how to help trauma build you instead of break you. And she's really, really, really famous for her story. And I had heard of that, like I had heard of this woman, I'd heard of, I'd listened to some of her talks. I didn't really know what the story was until I read the book. And I had a brief idea about it. I was listening to a podcast which is hosted by, uh, Ranjan Chatterjee. I'm not sure if you guys know him, but I'm going to, put a link or something in the description. So it's hosted by him, and it's called, it's based on lifestyle and health and wellness. And she was on that podcast, so there was talk about her on that podcast. This is like months ago, so my memory is a little shoddy here, but yeah, so there was talk about her on that episode, and it was actually in relation to Stoicism, which is a philosophy that says that, true happiness is in living the present, in living the moment, and really letting go of the past and the future. So Stoics are really, really weirdly happy people, if you ask me. That's how they've been historically defined. But anyway, there was something being said in that connection. And I thought it was very interesting, what could a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor who's a psychologist also have in common with Stoicism? And then I picked up the book. So a little bit more about the book, right? The book opens with a young Edith, and she is just the regular, young girl who's living in, a, you know, a war-torn country, or a country that's really about to go to war, right? She's Hungarian, and she lives with her family. She's got two sisters, and her wonderful parents, and she has a little bit of an achy relationship with her mother, but there's a lot to learn from her. I mean, she is quite an important figure in that sense in Edith's life. She also has a pretty nice and really wonderful father whom she is very close to. She has a boyfriend. She has, she dances, so she has her ballet classes. She's, almost like this athlete. She is an athlete, right? So she's very determined and focused and happy, just happy. She's just any other happy girl. And then, of course, the Nazis step in. Their whole life is turned upside down. And in fact, the story is about what happens once that conflict sets in. So she is sent to the concentration camps with her family, and basically the story is about what happens post that, what happens at the camp, and that in fact is given in excruciating detail. There is, in fact, I think it's so wonderful how your memories stick with you even after decades of that. Of course, this is a traumatic event, but that memory is so fresh and raw, and that wound is still there. When she's writing the book, she is late into her, um, I think she was in her 40s or 60s, 60s in fact, I think, when she wrote the book. Um, so she is not the girl she was. She was 16 when she was sent to the camps. It's been years and decades, and she's um, gone on to have her own life, but the memories are so fresh, and she describes everything in detail. It's like she remembers every little thing at that camp. She remembers how it was, how it looked, how it felt, how it smelled, the people there, everything, right? And it's so interesting to even just read that, to you feel like this is someone who's just been through something like that. And in fact, she mentions that, you know when you go through a trauma, it's not something that you can discard. It's not something that you can leave behind or forget. Even though that happens, even though that is something that happens, people do tend to completely block out some parts of their life, but most often, uh, you just can't. You want to discard it, but you can't, right? And that is where the conflict starts. That is where the problem starts. Um, that you can't erase this part of your life. And it's so interesting that she remembers everything. And the book really hits you very hard from the very beginning. The details that she mentions about her mother, the stuff that she mentions about how her mother was, and who she was and what she was like, everything, even though she had such little time. And when you're living through all of that, right, when you're living through your childhood, you don't think that someday this is going to be the most important part of my life, or this moment is going to be something that's going to mean so much to me later on. You don't predict these things. If I have to use uh, the Office quote, one of the Office quotes here, I think it would be Andy saying that you don't know you're in the best days of your life till they're past you, and you wish you could. You wish you could know them while you're living them, but you don't. Right? So many of us, so much of what happens in our childhood forms us. It stays in us, and it creates our personality. And this is something that's been observed through a lot of research and study. But we just don't know. We don't know what they are until we're much older. And when you're that much older, it's not like you can go back and change it. If it's something traumatic, if it's something bad or negative, you can't do anything about it. And you feel helpless. And that's where you begin to struggle. You begin to face that conflict. So anyway, going back to the book, you know, there's so much in it that I can't possibly break down in a review. There's parts where she's talking about feeling physical pain, right? She's talking about feeling uh, literal pain in her body everywhere, not being able to move, not being able to eat even. She talks, there's this really powerful, potent um, point about how when some people were liberated, right, when they were freed from those camps, uh, there was a girl who was starving, obviously. There was a girl who was really malnourished and she was really starving. And she was given something to eat. I think it was some chocolates or something. She was given something to eat by one of those soldiers who freed her, and she actually choked on that. And she died because she overate. And Edith makes this really important point about how there was the weirdness of life, right? The randomness of life, the fact that it these things don't make sense. This was a person who was literally starving, and then something like this happens, and it the whole spectrum of it, everything about the Holocaust is so cruel and painful and tragic. Yet, what Edith tries to say throughout the book, and what you learn from her words, and what you see through everything that she had been through, what she's trying to tell us is that trauma, no matter how painful, and it really was painful, you know, she tells you everywhere that it hurt. She shows it to you. She opens her wounds and she gives it to you. She puts it on that piece of paper and she says, "This is where it hurt. Right here, up there, down there. It hurt in all of these places and it hurt all the time." She mentions feeling like she was caged for years after she was liberated. She mentions it. She says that when you live in trauma, in that traumatic experience, you are in a prison still for years later on. Way, way after that trauma has passed. That time has passed. And so she lived in a prison for decades before she was actually freed. And this time, the one doing that freeing was herself, her own mind. She regained that control that she lost. So she gives you her wounds. She opens herself up. She shows you everything. She shows you the cruelty of the Holocaust, of her experience, of what she went through. The pain, the starving, the mental torture. The fact that she didn't even know what was going to happen to her the very next day. She didn't know when she would, she didn't even think about making it out, but she didn't know what was going to happen to her. Every single second was uncertain. Every single day was uncertain. And there's a callback here to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, right? He talks about this as well. What is the purpose of life? What made people still remain in their senses when they were in those concentration camps? What happened to people? Did they laugh? Did they smile? And Edith mentions that they did. That is the point of the book. That the trauma was there, the fear was there, the uncertainty was there, the pain was there. The trauma existed, the tragedy existed, the pain, the torture, humiliation, having to dance in front of Dr. Mengele, who was literally called the Angel of Death. All of that existed, all of that was there, and she went through it. Yet she smiled. Yet she laughed. Yet she found moments where things were peaceful, where she felt calmer. She found moments where there was hope. The cover of the book says, "Even in hell, hope can flower." And that is all that the book says. That is all that the book stands for. She goes through so much even later on in her life. And there's this mantra that she uses over and over again. I don't want to tell you what that mantra is. I'm so close to just saying it, but I really want you to pick up this book and find out for yourself. So I'm gonna leave that out. But there's this mantra that she keeps, that she picks up at the concentration camps, and she uses that every single day to survive in the camps. That's what she uses to keep her going. And way after she gets out of the camp, she still uses that. And it's only much later in life that she realizes that she doesn't have to live in that survival mode. She doesn't have to live like every moment is uncertain, even though it is. The difference is the choice. Everything is uncertain. Everything can be scary. There is fear, there is pain, there is love, there is hope, there is all of these things. A whole spectrum of emotions and experiences and identities and perspectives. There is all of these things. And you may feel like you have no control, no choice, no nothing, but you do. Your control is that you have a choice in how you respond to situations. And she says that it is that choice, the fact that she chose to hope, she chose to love, she chose to smile, she chose to hold on to life rather than whatever was happening at the time. She chose to hold on to herself, she chose to love and forgive and be free. And that is exactly why she was freed. So that was this marvelous book for you guys, and we've talked about it for a while now, and I hope that this episode really pushes you to buy that book. And if you are someone who's in a little bit of a icky phase with your mental health right now, I really suggest you pick this up. It did wonders for me, and I feel like whenever I need a little bit of that push, I'm gonna definitely be going back to this book because it is so, so, so beautiful. So I think if you really want a really touching and beautiful read, you really want to feel like you are connected to another person's story and you want to hear them out, you want to deal with some of the weird questions of life, and in fact just deal with everything that's happening right now, I suggest you really pick up this book, and I promise you it's going to change you. It's going to change something inside of you if you let it. So yeah, that's going to be the book for this week, and I hope you pick it up. If you do, let me know. Write to me, talk to me, do whatever it is you wish. Just be kind and thoughtful. And yeah, I will see you next time. Hopefully we're going to have some more fun stuff coming up. So yeah, keep reading, keep loving, keep listening, have fun, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much.